morning to you both.
Morning.
Good morning.
Let's just dive right in, shall we? Because the Express, Janelle, we'll start with you. This is all about the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, saying, actually, I'm going to go ahead with those plans to house migrants on a barge. He's kind of pressing ahead.
Yeah, he's doubling down after the Archbishop of Canterbury, has obviously said that he feels, with his faith behind him, that this is not the right moral or ethical thing to do. Rishi Sunak has many managers, so he has a problem where he has his party, he has the core group in his party who are meeting, talking about him being in power. He's also got the electorate, the vote, the Labour Party as well. So he's got many managers. So he is now trying to have to double down on the things that he really says that he wants to get done and thinks he can get done. So whilst I disagree very strongly with putting anyone on a barge, especially against their will, I see why he's doubling down on it. Will it be the right decision? I don't think we'll know that for sure until next year, but I think he has to make that decision where he's doubling down on something, because he has lots of different opinions and they're all different about what he should be doing.
And Kate, your views on this, really, because there'll be a core Conservative vote that wants focus on small boats. But here Rishi Sunak is saying, actually, I'm going to stay on course, I'm going to deliver for Britain.
I think we've got to keep humanity at heart, and I think there's going to be interesting news all week as we see this tussle continue in the Conservative Party at a point where we need calm. So I think very much we're going to hear more about it, but it's quite surprising to me that a party that's gone through so much turbulence, so much change, we're reading so much news in the paper today about the challenges they're still continuing to face. It's not particularly reassuring for us as a British public, is it?
And I suppose lots of people, are thinking, well, 13 years of Conservative leadership. We're at a time right now where lots of industries are striking. And we wanted to talk to you, Kate, in particular, the Sunday Times, running the story about Pat Cullen saying, actually, she's doing a bit of a U-turn here, and she's saying that the pay rise needs to be double digits. This is not going to sit well with the Conservatives, and also potentially with patients. What do you think?
When you have been, when you've benefited from our healthcare system and you've enjoyed all of the support those nurses give you, I think you completely value just how much they're a necessity and how much our NHS needs the investment. And I think there's been a lot of public support for a lot of the strike action that's happened so far this year, but the disruption, the challenges caused, the fact that hundreds of thousands of appointments and procedures have been cancelled and impacted now, and that we, the public, have heard that 14 unions accepted the 5% deal with a one-off payment, I think is changing the music somewhat. And I think also that Pat Cullen, who is the union leader for the RCN, she went back to her nurses and said, look, we should accept this deal, but they voted against. To come back with double digit really is quite shocking, I think, for a lot of people to try and swallow and understand that it has to be compromised. It has to be two organisations working together for the best outcome, without this feeling to be at all that it's not been a case that people have heard just how much the nurses need the support, need the increase. As many industries as we see, the workers making that point, cost of living, etc. The nurses have always said this is bigger than a pay deal. This is much bigger than just trying to get pay increase. This is about the workings of the NHS, the funding that's needed, and shining the spotlight on that. And we're now in May. That's significantly been done. When Pat Cullen's been asked about how she's made this what's being described as a U-turn today, she said she underestimated the nurses within the union, and that they are fighting hard for their rights. But one can only hope that both parties are going to eventually get into a point of having a conversation to move things along, because they seem to be coming from such opposing positions right now.
Indeed. Janelle, should we focus on this idea? I was quite intrigued by this. It's in the Sunday Telegraph. It's coming from Sir Keir Starmer saying, actually, I would like to give EU citizens the right to vote along with 16 and 17-year-olds. And this is going to worry the Conservatives, particularly in London, I suppose, where they could edge out the Tory party if this was to become policy.
Yeah, not only that, in the paper it goes on to say people are saying this is him laying the foundations for the EU, for the UK rejoining the EU by allowing EU citizens the right to vote. I mean, I actually think this is the right move. I think if you live in this country, and we're talking about settled EU citizens, some of them settled long before Brexit even happened. If you live in a country, if you're paying taxes, if you're contributing, I think you should be having a say in who is running the country, because that directly affects how you live your life, the services you have access to, etc., etc. You know, long ago, the rumblings for 16 and 17-year-olds having the right to vote has been happening. You know, again, I remember being 16, I wasn't earning a lot of money, especially not back then, but, you know, you're paying a tiny amount of tax. It's nice to have a say in what's happening in the place that you live, in the place that you're contributing to, and essentially also your future. You know, if you're 16 and 17, the voting that you're doing today is affecting what the country looks like in the next 10, 15, you know, years to come. I think that you should be able to have a say in that if you want to be informed and want to have that say. I don't necessarily think that this is, and it's an interesting one for Keir Starmer, because they're talking about not rejoining the EU and not having that as an agenda.
Yeah, indeed. It's felt like Sir Keir Starmer has tried to kind of quell Brexit, to neutralise Brexit. So this will be the first step, Janelle, do you think, of him actually having a position on the EU?
I mean, I would love to see Keir Starmer take a position on a few things. But I mean, I think the interesting thing is, it is interesting because those two things are, it's a juxtaposition. He's saying we're not going to do that, but he's doing this, and other people are seeing that as a re-entry into the EU. I don't actually think it is, but I think it is something that would maybe soften the EU towards us in how we treat their citizens who are here living amongst us, paying taxes, contributing, and all of those things. I think it's good to treat them well and to have a good relationship.
Now, Kate, you're an entrepreneur. We know that for sure. 3.8 million in cash. You got that handy to buy a house? Boris Johnson certainly does. That's in The People, Sunday.
Let me just reach under the desk here and grab my few millions out. Look, there's been a book deal with a book advance. There's been speaking work with speaking advance. This is where seemingly you make the money when you've been post-Prime Minister. Mr. Johnson, as you know, controversy has always been around money when it's come to his career. There was the redecoration of Downing Street. Anyone remember that? That was a few $100,000, I think. Complaining about the salary of $164,000, that wasn't quite enough. And then, of course, there was the challenge around the loan, which created a huge situation for Richard Sharp there at the BBC, and so I'm stand down. So, you know, money has been a narrative for a career, really. And I don't know, it's something about leadership qualities that you perhaps don't want someone's personal finance being so bounded about. But when it comes to a cash payout for a house, when most people facing the cost of living, a lot of people can't even get on the property ladder, can't even get a mortgage even though they deserve one. Very tough with your breakfast cereal this morning to swallow.
Indeed, Kate. I mean, they're calling him Skint Boris, gets this discount mansion. What world are they living in?
I hate the fact we call him Boris, to be honest. I do it myself, but it's Mr. Johnson, you know, it really puts a different slant on it. We don't call any of the Prime Minister
that's it.
You know.
Ladies, thank you so much for your contribution. We'll speak to you soon. Much more coming up after the break. Stay with Sky News.